In this video, guys, we're going to show you 3 different ways on how you can keep your crickets alive for a lot longer. At the minute, we're going through COVID-19 lockdown and we need to figure out how we can keep these animals alive for as long as possible so that we can keep feeding them to our animals and we don't have to leave the house as much. We're going to come up with the first way, which is going to be a simple way, not the best way, but a simple way. The second way is going to be slightly better. It covers a few more different things to help keep them along for a bit longer. The third way, the last way we're going to do, is the bigger, elaborate sort of way, which is dead easy, dead cheap, and it will keep your crickets alive for an awful lot longer, and you can stock up on crickets and keep them for as long as you need. So in this first tub, this is exactly what a tub of crickets is. You bought it straight from the shop and a week later, this is what it looks like. How bad is that? Majority of them are all dead. So we're basically going to show you how you can stop this from happening and how you can make them live a lot longer. Before we get to it, my name's Richard. This channel's called Northern Exotics. We do an awful lot of live food breeding videos. So if that's something you're interested in, feel free to subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And while you're down there, you're going to learn something new on this video. If you do learn something, make sure you do hit that thumbs up button. It really does help out massively. Now, why have they died? That comes up with 2 different scenarios. The 2 main causes for your crickets dying is 1, disease, parasitic infections, all that sort of stuff. So crickets are well known for carrying parasites. They don't harm your reptiles. Your reptiles can digest the parasites and pass them out perfectly fine. But if a cricket dies in the tub and the rest of the crickets eat it, which is extremely common, say that one that's died has got a parasite, it'll kill off the rest of your crickets in that tub. That's a big thing. So overcrowding inside your tubs is a big killer for crickets. The second way, the most easiest way for these animals to die is dehydration. Now you've got to think these animals came from the majority of the crickets come from the breeder. They go to the wholesaler. They've got the time in shipping and all that sort of stuff there. Then they go from the wholesaler to the shops. How long has it been with the wholesaler? How long does it take to deliver to the shops or post to the shops? They could take up to a week. And these animals have not had any moisture. So dehydration is a massive killer with majority of live food. Some live foods like superworms and dubia roaches, they can take it perfectly fine. Crickets on the other hand, locusts, they tend to dehydrate an awful lot quicker. So they've been a week there with no moisture source, so they're all dehydrated. Then if you bought the tub, you're like, oh look, I've got crickets, I've got enough to support my entire reptile collection. You leave them on the shelf, they're going to dehydrate even more. Bang, they're going to be dead in a week, just like these ones have. So number 1 covers the dehydration. You get the little tiny tubs. Now I've got these little live food tubs. You can even use the tubs that they come in, and then you can simply just get a moisture source and put it in there. That'll solve the dehydration problem. It won't solve the overcrowding and the parasitic loads and the infections and diseases, but the easiest way for you to keep your crickets alive for that little bit longer is dehydration. So whack in a banana peel, any sort of moist but not dripping wet fruit and vegetables. If you start adding moisture into there, the humidity will start spiking in the actual container. You might get a few other problems like that. Yeah, food might start moulding and rotting and stuff like that. You'll get fruit flies around your house. So you want something that's moist, that's not wet. So a banana peel is what I use, perfectly fine. It's a leftover byproduct in my house because my son will eat the bananas, and I'll just put the peel in with these. I'll also put them in with my superworm breeding farm, my dubia roach breeding farm, my mealworm breeding farm. If you want to learn how to breed any sort of live food, I'll stick a playlist just up there because I've done an awful lot very productively. The second way is trying to combat both dehydration and disease infection within one little container. So you don't want to use that little container that it comes in. You want to be able to empty all of that out into a slightly bigger tub, but you don't just want to stick them in a tub and leave them. That's wrong. You need to make sure that tub has got avid amount of ventilation. Stick a load of holes in the top, cut the whole top out, stick some mesh over it. You can do all kinds of things. Just make sure you've got an awful lot of ventilation. Crickets can smell, which in option 3 in a minute, I'll run through how you can stop the smell. But again, you need that slightly bigger tub. Now inside that tub, you want to add as much surface area as possible. You want to basically make it so that these crickets can climb everywhere. It's not overcrowded. Stick some sticks in there, some logs, some toilet roll holders, absolutely anything. Just chuck anything in there that won't mould, won't rot or anything like that. You can use whatever you want as substrate. Option 3, which I'll go over again in a minute, that covers a bit more detail on that, but that's an absolutely idealistic way of doing it. Add your moisture source. You don't want to add water, actual water, because crickets are known for drowning. In any of these scenarios, 1, 2 or 3, don't add water, you can use water crystals, water gels, just like this one, but you can't use actual water. Right, add a moisture source. We've been through the moisture source. I prefer to use naturalistic fruit and vegetables. Now, if you are going for fruit and vegetables, make sure they're organic. This is a simple top tip because this can also kill off all your animals if you get it wrong. Use a byproduct out of your cooking. If you use an organic food, use that. Any non-organic food can be filled with pesticides, fertilizers, anything like that the farmer would have spread all over his crops to stop the bugs from eating it. If you then give a fertilizer or a pesticide rich fruit and vegetable to your insects, what's going to happen? They're going to all die instantly. So if you wake up the next morning, they're all dead. Chances are that's what it is. So make sure you go to organic stuff. I tend to find that a lot of the cheap shops, the likes of your Aldi, your Lidl, that's just what we've got in the UK anyway. They tend to be organic all over because the organic stuff is the farmer has not paid to fertilise his animals, so the food tends to come in a bit cheaper. I don't know. Just make sure it always says organic on it. That's also doing 2 purposes. Not only is it keeping them alive for an awful lot longer, it's also gut loading them. And if you want to know what gut loading is, I have done a video on that in the past. It's basically where you're feeding your insects, your feeder insects, a really highly nutritious diet, and then you're then feeding your highly nutritious insects to your reptile. So your reptile is getting an awful lot of highly nutritious food. This also goes for tarantulas and whatever like that as well. But that's just what gut loading is. If you want to see that video, I'll link it just there. But let's move on now to option number 3, which in my eyes, it's the way I do it. It seems to be the best way and there's absolutely no smell at all. The way we do it is we use a much bigger tub and we use this. Let's start by running through exactly what we've got. We have got this big faunatarium. It's basically just a massive cricket keeper. I've taped up the holes just simply because I lost the lids that were on them basically. The lid is highly ventilated, but you've also got this cracking little door that you can get into if you need to. If you're squeamish about touching bugs, this probably isn't the best one for you. You take your lid off. Now, what do you want to put in the bottom? I use vermiculite. And this is the ingredient that stops all the smell. The vermiculite absorbs all the smell basically. And I stick a fair bit in the bottom. That should do. It can get messy this, so make sure you've got a bit of ventilation. They're only going to be in here for a few weeks. I'll put an inch in the bottom. That'll do. That will keep them smelling absolutely perfect with no smell at all for an awful long time. The next thing you want to put in is some surface area. I've only got 3 of these toilet roll holders, so I'm just going to whack them in side by side, just like that. I want to keep this little area down here a bit clear and a bit free, just simply because that's where I'm going to put the food in a moment. I've also got this little hide, which was made for me by a good friend of mine, Lewis Gaskell. Have a look. I don't know if you can see it. Northern Exotics 3D printed hide. This is for tarantulas and stuff. My tarantulas just haven't been able to get used to it. They tend to bury it. So I use it as and when, wherever I can. I'd whack it in. It's a bit of cover, a bit of hideout. I've also got this big box here, and I'm just going to basically rip the box up and grab these little bits and bend it and shape it and just basically do anything to sort of add a bit of a hide. There you go. I don't know. Just chuck it in. It's a bit of surface area, isn't it? That'll do. I'm not going to do too much. I've got 2 bits there. A bit more there. You just want to create loads of surface area for them to not want to basically bother each other too much. Next thing in this list is the food. As stated, I'm just going to use flat out banana peel. Now, I've actually got too much banana peel here. These have been in transit for about a week, so I'm going to use the big piece and I'm just going to layer it straight down just there. Now we'll come back to this in a second once I've put the actual crickets in, and it's amazing how quick they swarm to this. But I'm just going to do that. These 2 leftover bits I'm going to chuck into my mealworm breeding farm, and yeah, come along with me. There's some mealworms, there's some mealworms. This drawer here is my superworms. As you can tell, absolutely loads in there, so I'm going to drop that in there. And this one up here has got some bits and bobs in there, so I'll put them in there. Let's go back to these. Right, the crickets. Let's introduce the crickets and just see what happens. Inside your actual tubs of crickets, you've got all this dust and dirt and stuff at the bottom. You want to keep that, because inside that you might see the odd little caterpillar looking thing or worm looking thing or little tiny beetles. They're good. They're domestic beetles, and they basically clean up all the dead ones. So I keep them simply because even when I've fed all these off, I'll still keep those beetles and just chuck them in with my dubia colony or something like that. Now, you want to be quick with this because they are jumpers. So I've got the lid on hand just to basically go, poof, and then lid goes on top. They're all inside the tubes, they're on top of the tubes, they're in and out of absolutely everywhere. And on the banana, check those guys out, having a good old munch, rehydrating themselves, doing absolutely everything they should. Let's go down this way and have a look at these guys. Absolutely perfect. That is the best way of doing it. It keeps them there for an awful lot longer. It's always wise to get the slightly smaller size down if they're going to be in a while, because simply they grow. That's basically it. They do just grow. Look at them going in the hides just around there. Look at how many is on the food now. So it really does work. That keeps them alive for an awful lot longer. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you've learned it. If you have, please hit the thumbs up button.